addiction. And the burden of addiction is, there's the two sides of it. There's the life and the miracles of seeing men and women literally being raised from the dead. You come into the recovery rooms at this quote unquote rock bottom. I think rock bottom is typically when you put down the shovel, but rock bottom typically for the substance abuse addict is death. And so when you put down the shovel, we come in and we're underweight and we're like, our minds are not sane at all. And within a few short months, that seemed like an eternity, maybe 6 months, a year, 2 years, you see a person that was not able to be a part of society at any real level, to seeing a person that has had life breathed into him. And that's an amazing thing to be a part of. And it's like the high of the high. Like, it's like, this is why I wake up in the morning, one, for my own life that has been restored to sanity, and I have a purpose and meaning in my life. And then the backside of that is the life, but then the death. And so recently we experienced the death part of it. And it's sad because it doesn't have to happen. And so I think my heart is heavy in the fact that addiction is life and death. It literally is life and death. And the enemy is always going to take what's good and God-given and twist it. And so that's kind of the basics of addiction, is that we have these needs, we have these things internally, and God is our savior, God is our connector, God is our life, our comfort, our joy, our peace, all of those things. And when we go to alcohol or drugs or a relationship or food, whatever it is, we receive all of those things, and the enemy turns those things against us and tries to destroy us, because we are made in the image of God, and the enemy wants to destroy that image at any cost. And so I heard a quote through a book. It was the history of gunpowder, and in their quest to win wars, they invented gunpowder, and through that process, they didn't have the iron to be able to use for that, so they were taking church bells, and church bells is what unifies the town or the city and brings people together, and they were destroying church bells and melting them down for bullets. And so that's what the enemy is going to do, is try to get into where God has given you a mind, a spirit, and he's going to try to destroy those things. And he's going to try to take what is good and God-given and utterly destroy them. And so I wanted to read a psalm that maybe you've heard of. It's Psalm 23. It's there's so much meaning and interpretation in this psalm. And so I just wanted to read us this psalm and then kind of go through it a little bit, and then touch on a need that we all have. That when I was on holidays, I saw this need in a kind of funny experimentational fishbowl type idea. So let me read the psalm and I'll kind of unpack it a little bit. But just keep in mind that the enemy is always going to destroy the good that God's given you. So the enemy is going to come and destroy our minds. He's going to destroy the table that is our community that God has set before us. And he's going to try to destroy and take away the feast that God wants to give us. And so we'll read the psalm and we'll see all of those things. The psalmist will touch on that. So the Psalms is kind of a book of poetry. And so this is one king's heart to us. So let me read it. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along paths, brings honor to his name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid. For you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me. You prepare a feast for me. You prepare a table and a banquet for me in the presence of my enemies. You honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessings. Surely the goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all of the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever. And so there's a couple things at the very beginning. It says that God is our shepherd. So when you look at that concept of this idea of God, and maybe that's new to you, but this idea of a shepherd, of someone that is in charge, somebody that is the manager. We see in step one that we're powerless over our addictions and that our lives are unmanageable. Alcohol never made my life unmanageable. It actually managed my life for me. And then I was trying to manage this restless, irritable spiritual condition. So I am no longer able to be the manager of my life. And so I need a new manager. And this picture of God being a shepherd is a great picture of a manager, of somebody that's in charge of a flock of sheep, that cares for them, protects them, nurtures them, probably sings to them. It's a lonely job. And so this is that idea. The other idea that we have in the big book is that of an employer, that of a father. Those types of ideas is how we can picture God. And then the other way we can picture God is he meets all of our needs. So just like alcohol did for me what I couldn't do for myself, in my spirit, I had this problem before I ever had alcohol issues. I had this problem with inside of me. And as soon as I used, it all went away. And so I have these needs to be loved, to be comforted, to be protected, to be nurtured, to be cared for, to be noticed. And so this is the idea of that concept of God, is once we start giving our will in our lives to a power greater than ourselves, we might not know God in all of his character, but this is who God is going to be for us. He's going to meet all of our needs. And as he meets our needs, we get to do his purpose. And so he's a God of rest. He leads us. He renews our strength. He is our strength. He guides us. And it's to be a witness to him. It brings honor to his name. And in verse 4, when I walk through the shadow of the valley of death, it's not if I do, it's when I do. And we can either do this with God or without God. And for most of our lives in active addiction, we've been doing it without God. And we've been getting burnt, and we sit in it, and we're full of guilt and shame because we can't get out of it. It consumes us, and we lose our lives because of it, because we don't walk through it. We stay in it. And so God is saying that the storm of life, the shadow of the valley of death is going to be all around us. It's going to, just because the nature of our world, it's going to be there. But we have a shepherd that's going to be able to take us through it. And that brings me great comfort, because I've been in that valley. I've been in the shadow. I've been in the whirlwind and the tornado. And it's a horrible place to stay in. But God's promise is, I will lead you through it. And then he says that my rod and my staff will comfort you. And so I don't know much about shepherds. I don't even know if they exist today. But I had to look up the rod and the staff. They're two different pieces of equipment. The rod is more like a billy bat. The rod is more of a protective instrument. And so we have a shepherd that is going to protect us. When I came into recovery, I was self-protecting. I built walls. I had fears that kept me away from community, that kept me away from friendships, that kept me away from authority, especially. And I had built these walls and boundaries that actually isolated me. And so I was self-protecting. Now, when I come into recovery, I'm told that I can't use these protective measures that I've used my whole life, that I've survived with. Because the life of recovery isn't about survival, it's about thriving. It's about growing. It's about being a use to the world around us and not just being in survival mode, not just living paycheck to paycheck. And I don't mean in a monetary way, I mean in an emotional and spiritual way. And so the staff, the rod is about being protected, maybe bringing a little bit of discipline in our own lives, maybe giving a little tap on the butt, to give us warnings. And that's a beautiful thing when you have somebody that's going to warn you about danger, but then you have somebody that actually is able to do something about the danger. And then the staff is this kind of like a kind of like a rod, but like more like a walking stick with a long curved end. And so they use that as a tool to be able to pull a sheep close to them that maybe has intrepidation and fear and is a little bit anxious. And maybe you can relate to that. I'm scared of people and places and things, and it's like all this noise, but the shepherd wants to nurture you. And so he would pull the sheep close to him, or he would steer the sheep a different way, or he would use the other end and be able to guide the sheep to where they need to go, where the food is, or keep them out of danger, or protect them from not falling off a rock or whatever it is. And so the shepherd has tools for our good. And then the psalmist says that you prepare a feast for me, you prepare a table for me amongst my enemies. And so now we're seeing this relationship with the shepherd, the relationship with the Father, that we are supposed to be around the enemy, that the enemy isn't gone. We're actually sitting at a table with a feast, and my enemies are around me. And I find that really fascinating, that we get to be a witness to the power and the love of God. We get to be a witness to the power and the love of a shepherd. We get to be a witness to those around us that are separated from God. And if you've been involved in a 12-step process, the whole process is for someone to realize that they're disconnected to God and connect to God. And out of that connection, we get to pass on the message. We don't just go pass on the message without being connected to the source of the message. We actually bring what's inside of us to the world around us. And so this is the idea of this table and this feast, because the life of recovery is abundance. The life of recovery is going from death to life. And yeah, you might work for minimum wage. That's not what I mean by abundance. That's not what I mean by a feast. The feast is all of your needs being met. You will have comfort that you have never known. You will have peace that you've never known. You'll have joy bubbling up inside of you. You will have gratitude and purpose like you've never had before. And so that's the feast that God sets with us. The thing is, like I said about the church bells, the church bells were melted down to make bullets in the history of Gunpowder book. And so the enemy's always going to take what's good, what's going to bring community, what's going to bring warning, and he's going to boil it down, make something different out of it to kill people. And so this idea of a table, the enemy, we give the power to the enemy through our minds, that the enemy will actually sit down at our table, and the enemy will start speaking to you. And the enemy will start twisting things, and the enemy will give you a different perspective of reality. And all of the promises that God, the shepherd, has for us, he will twist them and he will manipulate them. And we actually give permission through our minds that the enemy is sitting down at our table. It doesn't say that. It says the enemy, we will be in the presence of the enemy. The enemy won't be sitting at our table. And so who's sitting at your table? Is it the community around you? Is it your sponsor? Is it the love of God? Is it the children of God? Or is an enemy member infiltrated your table? Who is sitting at your table? You honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessings. Surely the goodness and unfaithful love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever. I think that's a beautiful promise that he will take you through the valley, that he will give you life of abundance and make a table in front of your enemies. But the enemy will try to sit down at our table. And we have the ability, with the power of God, to tell the enemy that he can't sit at our table anymore. The enemy comes in through our minds and wants to take our feast away, wants to take the banquet away, wants to poison us. And so I was reminded when I was on holidays, one of our biggest needs is to be noticed. And I know that we have a lot of needs. Core needs to be comforted, to have joy, to have peace, not to have a running mind all the time. We have a lot of needs just in our emotions and our spiritual nature. And what I saw was at the hotel that we rented in Montreal, there was we had like it was a hotel in an office building, and at the top floor of the office building was a hotel, and it wrapped around, so all the rooms were like the office building around the structure, and in the middle was like a little like duck pond and a little duck river, but in the middle of that was a swimming pool with a wet bar and a hot tub. And it was a really interesting, like, basically I did not need Instagram or Facebook or YouTube. I just sat there and I was like, get out the popcorn and start watching the interesting show of the meld of different people and age groups that were entering into the pool. And there was like 100 people there. And so you had the parents with the little kids, you had the young adults, you had a couple wedding parties, bachelorette party, bachelor party. And so you had this like really loud and crazy mix of people. And what I was starting to notice was that everyone was doing something, or there was a reason why they were dressed the way they were. And it was all about getting noticed. And so I saw the guy in the swimming pool, and he yells to the bartender, "Another round for my friends." And the guy brings like 12 beers, and that guy was noticed as like the generous guy, like he's the baller. And then you had the girls in the string bikini, and then you had the moms who feel awkward in any swimming suit and they have the t-shirts on, and you had this meld of people that were all trying to be noticed. You had the guy that's puffing up his chest and you can tell he works out like 10 hours a day. And you had these really interesting mix of people, and the core of it was all notice me, look at me, approve of me. And I got to that conclusion by the children. And so what was happening in front of me, there was a dad and a mom, and they were in the pool, and they had two kids, and they were trying to talk to their friends. And there was a boy probably about 7 years old, and then the girl was probably 5, I would assume. And so they had, the girl had the little water wings on, and they would jump in the pool, and they would yell at the mom and dad every time. Look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. And, the parents are trying to have a conversation. So the parents would glance, and then the little boy would like jump into the pool and do like this. And it was super basic. I was never impressed. Like, I was like, dude, do a backflip with like a half somersault and like eat an ice cream cone while you're doing it. Or like the little girl would do the same thing over and over again, thinking she's doing something different. But every time without fail, it was like, look at me, look at me, look at me, look what I'm going to do. And it made me think of that Saturday Night Live skit about that girl that would be superstar. And she would come into the room and go, look what I can do. And we have this core need, even in a swimming pool environment, that we're all have this need to be noticed. And so I found that really interesting. how a shepherd will always notice and count the sheep, how a father will always take notice of his children. And if you're new into recovery, this is our position that we get to take. When I look at the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous on page 63, it says, when we sincerely took such a position, what's the position that they're talking about? They're talking about this relationship with God. They're talking about this relationship with a father as a child, with a shepherd as a sheep, as an employee to an employer, as a agent to the principal, and so you start to look at that relationship, and that's the position that we need to take. All sorts of remarkable things start to follow. We had a new employer being all powerful. He provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. Established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves and our little plans and designs. More and more, we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. As we felt new power flow in, that is our spiritual connection to God. As we enjoyed peace of mind, we discovered we could face life successfully as we became conscious of his presence. We became to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, and thereafter. We were reborn. And so when we take up this position under the wing of God, under the watchful eye of the shepherd, he is always going to notice you. And so the freedom in this of taking up this position, I don't need you to notice me. I don't need the approval from the world around me. I need the approval from my Father. And so I get to look like these little kids. They didn't care about me looking at them. They didn't care about the cute girl in the bathing suit looking at them. They didn't even care about the bartender looking at them. They wanted to be seen by their dad. Dad, look at me, look what I'm going to do this time. Look at me. I got my water wings on. I'm waiting to jump. Look at me. And that's the God that we have, is the God that's going to notice you. And that's the beautiful thing, that is the burden that we carry, is that I need to be noticed by everybody around me. I don't know if you can relate to that, but we're trying to be noticed by the world around me. Look at me, look what I can do. And so this is actually part of the relief of the bondage of self, is that when God starts to notice you, when God starts to identify you, when you become a true child and give the responsibility to the shepherd, giving the responsibility of my life to the care of God. That is a beautiful thing, because it actually says in the big book in step 3, we give our will and our life to the care of God. That actually means we have a caring God. We have a caring employer. We have a caring shepherd. And so I just wanted to bring that to you guys, is Psalm 23 is that God is going to make a table around your enemies to be a witness to them. But our goal is not to let them in through our minds and into our table. The enemy will come to seek, search, and destroy. We will go through the valley of the darkness, the shadow of the valley of death, but he will take us through it. And we will be his witnesses as long as we come under his shepherdness and become his children and give him the responsibility. That is all I have.